Appreciate that. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me. Again, I echo my panelist mates. Thank you, Rafa, for the invitation, and Isabella for the organization. Armando, much appreciated. As he said, my name is Chris Fetters. My company is Louisiana 23 Development Company. We are in a partnership with the Plaquemines Port Authority out of Louisiana. What I have the pleasure to inform you of today is a project that we've been undertaking for the past two and a half years. It's a very large new Gulf Gateway terminal situated on the lowest part of the Mississippi River. So if I can get this to work. So the project is a cooperation between the Plaquemines Port Authority, which is a state jurisdiction within Louisiana. Its jurisdiction encompasses the same as its parish boundary lines. Plaquemines Parish is situated the first 100 miles of the lowest part of the Mississippi River and is one of the largest parishes or counties, as you would have elsewhere in the United States, within Louisiana. Historically, it's been very prolific in supporting oil and gas and refining capacity, but to date does not have an actual formal port operation. That said, it still, as of last year, was 11th in the country as far as total tonnage processed through its authority. There's some very large refining operations by both Chevron and Phillips 66, as well as some agricultural products. Louisiana 23 was stood up approximately 2 years ago to work as a cooperative partner in helping establish and develop the vision that is the Port's master plan. So approximately 10 years ago, the convening authority down in Plaquemines Parish set out to try to understand why every other port in North America was growing exponentially, and they were still stuck exactly where they had been for the previous 50 years. That master plan was released and carried 3 tenets. First of it, which was that they needed to change the governance. The previous port jurisdiction was operated as almost a part of county government because it was at the end of the line, and the remaining part of the state just really had no interest in it. So it was always operated as an extension of the county government. Second was to hire a full-time executive director. They did that in 2013. And with that, they set out and they fulfilled the last tenet, which was to become a landlord port. So the overall port master plan was predicated on growing trade demands throughout the globe. We had just come off of the heels of the announcements of the Panama Canal expansion. All ports within the Gulf of Mexico were trying to seek out and figure out a way to get to 55 feet to be able to service these new larger vessels. As that has evolved, as you can see on the pictograph below, those vessel sizes, especially if you're talking containers, have truly grown exponentially in the last 25 to 30 years. 25 years ago, an 8,000-9,000 TEU vessel entering into a port of call in the United States was considered to be a very large vessel. Today, we're seeing orders for 23, 24, 28,000 TEU vessels. So this is growing at a very, very rapid rate, far faster than what had been historically seen in this industry. What that's done, though, is it's caused a bit of a problem. Historically, you look at developments, cities all around the globe, a port or a trade post is established, city grows up around it, time passes on, and the population encroaches upon there. It's no different along the Gulf of Mexico. Look for our Gulf ports. Those original major port locations, Houston, New Orleans, Tampa, Gulfport, Mobile, were all built with that same mindset and have since seen the encroachment of millions of people that have now translocated down to the Gulf of Mexico to live. But those ports were established to handle vessels that were less than 10,000 TEUs. So now you have a port that's highly congested by population. It was built to be too small for what the current market demand is, but the market has responded in a different manner. It's now growing, and now the vessel sizes are twice the size of what the original port design was built to be. So what this allowed for, through the Port of the Master Plan, was a new port development, a true greenfields opportunity. Because not only did you have these increasing sizes of vessels, and it's not just in containers, it's in crude carriers and bulk handlers. That's what you've seen in some of the other presentations, that everything's getting bigger and more efficient, more economic, and more green. So it called for a new plan, a new port opportunity. And that's what the Port of Plaquemines set out to do beginning approximately 6 years ago. Why? Why does Plaquemines work? Because if you look at the Midwest of the United States, It's one of the largest consumption zones in the world. If you were to extract those 13 or 14 states from the U.S., that would be the 5th largest GDP in the world. There are more products that are consumed and manufactured there than in many other parts of the region and of the hemisphere. So you've got this natural consumption zone, this natural production zone, and you've got a series of ports and industries and cities that have been built up in and along that river system. But you don't have a true new gateway terminal facility. So the Port of Plaquemines came up with this plan in order to be able to respond to that call. And as you can see in the pictograph, what you have is traditionally, in order to be able to access that region in the United States as things have grown, if it's coming in from the Asian markets or across the Pacific, it'll enter through the primary ports of like LA Long Beach, formerly Oakland, and SeaTac. Or on the eastern seaboard, you've got New York, New Jersey, Norfolk, and then now Savannah and Charleston, as well as what goes down on here in Miami. Interestingly, though, if you take a look at it, this worked up until the canal expansion and up until the increasing size of vessels. If you take a look at the image on the left, that first dark line represents the line of demarcation. If goods were to be brought into the United States from the Asian market across the Pacific, anything west of that line, it was more economic to service those goods from the port on the West Coast. Now, if you really pay attention to that, that can be as much as 1,800 miles of transfer of cargo. When the canal expansion occurred, that line moved 500 miles to the west, and that opened up the entire Gulf of Mexico for the U.S. as far as the new ports and expansion. The dashed line that you see is our interpretation, or our extrapolation, I guess is the best way to put it, by bringing on the Plaquemines Gateway Terminal facility and the assets that bears to bring, both from a rail connectivity as well as an onward movement by water that I'll talk about a little bit later in the presentation. So that's essentially the business case of what brought about this opportunity for us to take a look at. So a little bit of detail of the different areas. So this kind of gives you an idea. If you take a look, and one of the first questions I have to ask people when I'm providing information on this is, first, do you know where Louisiana is? Second, do you know where Plaquemines Parish is? And if you take a look at the map, that's the little piece of land that sticks out into the Gulf of Mexico. It's the first 100 miles from the mouth all the way up, and you can see the city of New Orleans there on the map. So the city of New Orleans is at about river mile 90, and this entire jurisdiction encompasses that first portion. So during the development of the plan, it would identified approximately 8,000 acres of property that was still at greenfields and available for development. And if you think about it in port development now, and those presentations you've heard, both at this conference and at others, 8,000 acres of property that's available for port development is significant. It also encompasses about 5.5 to 7.5, depending upon how the final layout is, of river frontage. And this is actually a true deep draft port. It's one of 5 located on the lower Mississippi River within Louisiana, meaning that you're greater than 45 feet of draft depth naturally. This river, as part of federal projects, is being pushed to 50, almost 55 feet in this region. So we'll be able to service those largest vessels that are coming through both the Suez and the Panama Canal. Another interesting aspect that was drawn from the conclusion is the river in this area is mostly straight from the primary areas that we're looking to develop, and it's also 2,800 feet wide with an average draft depth of approximately 60 feet within the development zone. So that means not only do you have natural depth, but you have natural width that means that you don't have to encumber yourself with a turning basin. So the dredging operational cost is much, much lower for this type of a development. Lastly, really the big piece of this is it's the best and the worst thing about Plaquemines Parish is that it has a very rural environment. So there are no bridges that are currently within this 100-mile span. So you have maximum draft depth of 60 feet and you have no air draft restrictions. So this rural setting truly allowed for a blank canvas approach to what was going on. Real quickly, some of the primary areas that you take a look at that the plan called for, I'll talk about in detail, are liquefied natural gas, a container terminal facility. You've also got a significant short line railroad improvement, air cargo, and then you get into the agricultural bulk. You've got warehousing, you've got specialty chemicals, specifically methanol, some possibility for automotive management, as well as recycling. Again, you've got plenty of space in order to be able to manage through. Lastly, when you take a look at this region, what makes a port work is its ability to have intermodal connectivity into the hinterland or into the other connective areas of the consumption zone. Plaquemines is very, very uniquely situated. I've already talked about the deep water marine access. It's also situated directly on the Mississippi River with miles of river frontage, so it has direct access to the cheapest onward movement of cargo, which is that inland marine component. From a rail standpoint, there are 2 locations in the United States that have the convergence of all 6 Class 1 rails. One is in Chicago, or just outside Chicago and Joliet, and the other is there in New Orleans. So we have full rail connectivity. Highway, we have direct access to multiple interstates from the port facility, and then we have an air cargo component that I'll show you about quickly. And lastly, from a developer standpoint, Louisiana has one of its best natural resources, which is underground pipelines. We have over 70,000 miles of feedstock and refined product delivery systems. So the terminal is divided into 3 separate campuses. The northern campus, which is situated directly next to Naval Air Station, which allows us for the introduction of commercial air cargo onto an existing DoD facility. So the CapEx goes extremely low when you don't have to build 10,000, 11,000 foot runways. There's a central campus, which we already have a project announced there, which is the Plaquemines Liquids Terminal, as well as what we call a secondary handling facility for the transloading of some of the containerized cargo. And then the main campus is there to the south. It's approximately 5,500 acres. One project is already announced, which is Venture Global. And then by the end of this year, we expect a public announcement regarding a container terminal operator and ocean carrier for the container terminal. Next, what I've got is just a few renderings. Pictures worth a lot more than the words are. This is a rendering of what the commercial air cargo is set to look like. That is the tarmac situation is directly along the southern border of the existing naval facility. The runway there you see at the top of the image is the existing 6,000 foot that ties into a 10,000 foot runway. Our studies have shown that if you want direct access globally for sensitive goods, 11,000 feet allows you direct access by air. So from an investor standpoint, that's a 1,000 foot runway investment rather than 11,000 feet. This provides a keen opportunity cost. Facility will also have direct access by rail and have the availability of almost 12 million square feet of warehousing, primarily situated for cold storage. So view of the secondary handling facility, or the primary warehouse industrial park, situated on nearly 1,200 acres directly across a 4-lane highway, about a quarter mile from the river access. So this will have direct connectivity to both the southern and the northern campuses for rail and transfer that. It's 15 million square feet of warehousing that's all set to be built. This is one of the projects that's been announced. It's a Plaquemines Liquids Terminal. It's sponsored by Tallgrass Energy out of Kansas City, which is currently now under purchase by Blackstone as a private equity corporation. It's a 20 million barrel crude oil blending and storage facility. It has a feeder pipeline into Cushing, Oklahoma, which is the U.S.'s largest underground strategic petroleum reserve, capable of delivering 800,000 barrels a day of U.S. light sweet crudes, as well as a rail connectivity to provide about 180,000 barrels a day of heavy Canadian. This will serve as a blending and export point. We can direct load into the river, into the Suez and Aframax class vessels, or we have a 55-mile pipeline going out into the Gulf for direct loading of VLCCs at 100,000 barrels an hour. So you can direct load a VL in about a day. Southern campus area, as I said, is divided up into multiple parcels. One of the projects that's already been announced is the Venture Global Liquefied Natural Gas Facility. Originally, the first announcement was for the Plaquemines LNG, which is a 20 million ton per annum facility. Earlier this year, they announced a second phase, which they referred to as Delta LNG, which will add another 24 million tons of LNG. These projects are already at final investment decision and are moving forward on a 1,200 acre portion of that 5,500 acre campus. Primary container terminal, again, we expect an announcement here at the end of the year. It's situated on approximately 1,000 acres at the southern part of the campus, so you're 50 miles from blue water. It's 2.5 miles of river frontage. It will have a 5-berth system capable of managing 3 ocean-going Neo-Panamax vessels. The carriers indicated to us that they're targeting upwards of 23,000 TEU capacity into the river for transloading, as well as 2 vessel berths to the north for an inland vessel liner. On dock, it will have capabilities of 7 unbroken unit trains and nearly 7 million square feet of warehousing. So this is in a normal port environment that you have today in the U.S. Those facilities are maybe ordered in the 100, 150 acre type of a system. This is just below 1,000 acres of all behind the fence at grade on dock facility. A little bit of a different view of it. The final design will depend upon the terminal operator's desire, but this kind of gives you a magnitude and a scope of the dimension of what we're talking about. So, all sounds great, but if you can't get the product in or out, then the port itself serves no function. So we've been working diligently to improve the intermodal connectivity in order to be able to access that Midwestern market. The first is a significant rail infrastructure improvement. Currently, there is rail access. It's serviced by, here in the U.S., a short line, but it only has 3 unit trains a day of capacity. In order to be able to meet our target, we need to be able to get to nearly 20 unit trains a day of capacity, making us one of the largest rail intermodal terminals in the United States as well. In order to be able to achieve that, you'll see a line there that's a new superstructure that will be privately financed. It'll be capable of handling 15 trains a day in and out as the primary mechanism. And it'll tie directly into that Class 1 hub that I mentioned earlier, which is in western New Orleans. So that will give us full intermodal connectivity into the hinterland, mainly targeting the Dallas market, which is kind of the southernmost of the Midwestern distribution and consolidation zones, in order to be able to feed out into that natural existing infrastructure there in the U.S. So that kind of handles the rail play up the western side of the Midwest. The eastern side will be serviced by a new company, or a company that's been around for a few years, that has a direct connection to the Plaquemines port, which is American Patriot Holdings. These gentlemen founded a company a number of years back, and they advanced and finalized a design on what we call a new container on vessel delivery system. Historically on the Mississippi River, we look at container on barge. 350 containers on 10 barges, strapped going up the river, 5 miles an hour. This vessel revolutionizes that delivery system and changes the economics completely. This vessel can handle 2,500 TEUs in a lift. It's an exoskeleton design that does not have screws or props of its own. It's run on axial Z drives, so it pushes no wake. So it has no water disturbance. Drafts only 9 feet when it's fully laden. The rest of the specifications are there and can be available to you, but this changes the economics for that river time system. And so what we've done is we've taken this concept and we've taken all of the delivery systems that what we have, and we've formed, through the port's cooperative effort, a strategic inland waterway network. I know some other folks today have talked about vertical integration of a hinterland type of environment. The regions that you see on there harvest the main points within the Midwest. These groups are now coming together in order to be able to utilize Plaquemines through its develop as a primary gateway terminal to service the world. A little bit of a different look at it. It allows, with access into Memphis, Arkansas, western Arkansas, Little Rock, St. Louis and Kansas City, Cairo, and all the way up into Chicago. Now you're talking about the ability for one working group to be able to service the agricultural environment, which is moving to be containerized, the bulk cargo environment, and the crude service environment that we've talked about. So now you have this push-pull. In the conversations that I've had with Rafa and others about coming online here, one of the things that's drawn us into working in the Latin American market is everything that we've always worked on has been predicated on an east-west travel route. Well, now we've seen what the missing piece is for us, which is the north-south trade. Because while all of this sounds great, we have nearly a 3-to-1 deficit of exports from the U.S. to imports. We're dealing with a lot of empty containers, a lot of empty vessels. So at that point in time, what we are demanding and needing is imports. We've had the opportunity to work with some of the stakeholders in Bocas de Ceniza in Barranquilla, as well as in Suape in Brazil. And we're working forward with those stakeholders to establish more of a dedicated push-pull environment and opening that Latin American market and giving it this direct nearby gateway into the Midwest. So I appreciate the time. Try to get through it as quickly as I could, Armando, and meet that clock, because otherwise I'll get the hook to get out of here. Again, thank you very much for the time. If you have any questions, I'll be around afterwards.